Hi guys, this is Banu Prakash, and today we are going to discuss about AWS networking. Since previous session, we have seen what is the importance of cloud computing, and in the cloud computing era, we have seen what is code, not code like what is a compute and what is the storage. In the compute we have seen how to start multiple servers, and in the storage we have seen how we can store the data into databases and S3 bucket, and how we can launch the database in the RDS instance. This and all we have seen. So we have some idea about compute, and we have some idea about storage. And today let's discuss about the networking concepts in AWS and how the networking happening and what is the different concepts in the AWS. So I will not go into the expert level because we are a beginner in the AWS, and I will touch base like in the same level. So once you start working on it, you will explore multiple things. So, what we need to, what we need in the cloud technology? We already discussed we need compute and storage. Compute is nothing but number of servers which we require, and storage is nothing but we wanted to store the data in some particular location, either S3 bucket or RDS or EBS or EFS. Such things we already seen. So that's what I have represented here. Compute and storage we mainly need in the cloud. So we have chosen one vendor called Amazon Web Services, which provides the same facility like compute and storage, and other vendors like Azure and Google Cloud also there. And in the compute and storage, like I'm asking a question, is it fine to store all the servers and storage in one location across the world? Definitely not, because it will become a single point of failure. Because if some the database or some RDS or some other storage which we are storing centrally in one place, if some any natural disaster happens and if that is damaged, all the data can be lost. That is why we don't want to store in one particular location. That is why the picture came like region. Different regions we wanted to, AWS is providing. If you can see the yellow color boxes, these and all, AWS regions provided by AWS, and the red color, dots are AWS edge locations. So what is, yeah. So what is region? What is edge location? We will see now. Reason is nothing but countrywide. People want to store their data. They don't want to expose their data outside of their country. That is specific restrictions would be there, particularly in the bank-based companies. They don't want to send the data across the country. They always wanted to store data within the country. That is why a concept called region came. So whichever region AWS is providing, I hope it is 9 or 10 regions are there. In that region only, we can select. There are a couple of regions in US, couple of regions in India. Like for India, Asia Pacific, that is Singapore, and Asia for Japan also Asia Pacific, and Europe West Dublin. So like this, we have different regions, and the region is nothing but countrywide, I can say. Not only countrywide, in specific, if I say region, multiple countries they combine and they call it as region. So if you want to go for a country specific, then availability zone is the concept. So let me go back, and in the previous section, AWS region is nothing but multiple countries is a combination. They have chosen a region. So each edge location will be present in the countrywide. So in the India, we have Mumbai location is the one of the edge location where we can store our data if you don't want to send our data outside of our country. So in the India, in Mumbai, we have, and in that we have three availability zones. So because even in India, also within India, also we don't want to store in one central location. Even if some natural disaster happens, we don't want to lose the data. That is why we wanted to make some replicas. So either three availability zones we have in India, we can store or we can replicate our redirected in three availability zones. So always any one of the zone will be available. All three will be available. In the worst case, at least one will be available so that our data can be secured. This is the concept of region and availability zone. I hope you are clear about that. Region is nothing but it's not country specific. Some region AWS by default selected it and they marked as region. And edge location is nothing but it is provided a country basis and within the country the data will be stored. And within the edge location itself, we have multiple availability zones where we can replicate our data so that high availability can be maintained. Yeah. So once you open the AWS, the first concept in the networking is VPC. VPC is the term given by AWS and it is called as virtual private cloud. So within the VPC itself, everything will be hosted. So either zones, availability zones, subnets, or network security, or security groups, everything like entire AWS cloud is under your VPC only. So that VPC is specific to a couple of regions, and each region can have multiple VPCs. No need to worry about the terminologies. You will come to know once you do some practice. So as I said, VPC is the central point for hosting all of your compute and storage concepts. Within the VPC, you have multiple availability zones. For example, if you take our example like India, within VPC, we have Mumbai, and then within that we have multiple availability zones. We have three availability zones. AP South 1A, 1B, 1C. These are the three availability zones we have within India. And so whenever you wanted to create AWS VPC, by default AWS will provide a VPC which is having all the default settings. So that we in the previous sessions while we create a compute or storage, we by default took those default VPCs. You can even select that VPC and do your learning practices. There is nothing wrong. But some people want to customize VPC for their company requirements and they wanted to create a fresh one. In such cases, they can create a new VPC. So in the AWS, they can go to the AWS Management Console and go to a service called VPC. In that VPC, VPC, they will have an option to create it, create a new VPC. So then all the network concepts are based out of IP ranges. So that's what in the VPC main VPC, the main IP address IPv4 is the currently available and IPv6 is not available. So IPv4 you can see 172.30.00/16. This is one of the IP address and as an example they have given. So this is the main IP address. Within this IP address only, the inside availability zones should exist. So the availability zone can be represented in the VPC as a subnet. You can see that they mentioned as subnet. Within the availability zone, like within the VPC, the availability zone can be represented as subnet. So because they wanted to point with a specific IP address, and that is why they're calling it as subnet. And a VPC level, the same IP address is called as IPv4 CIDR. This is the main IP address, and this is the sub IP address. Within these IP addresses only, we will be able to launch our compute servers. So, uh, so these are the my first concept is VPC, and within the VPC we will have multiple subnets. So in our case, an example in the Mumbai region, we have three availability zones. As I told you, availability zone is nothing but a subnet. So we have three subnets, and we can even customize what kind of subnets we require. In this scenario, this guy made one as private. You can see private subnet, and here they made it public subnet. So what is the difference between public subnet and private subnet? Public subnet, private subnet, what is the main difference is whenever you launch an instance, if you wanted to open in the browser as a public user, then it is called as public. So if you remember in the compute section, we installed Apache, Nginx, and we access that using the browser. where we are able to access without any issue. If you are able to access like that, means that is public subnet. But some of the companies doesn't wanted to expose like that, so that they wanted to maintain some private subnets. And such cases they will go for the private subnets. So while creating the VPC, you might need to select the primary IP before CADR first, and then you need to divide the secondary IPs. These are the secondary IPs for subnet level. The above one is the VPC level. So you can no need to worry about this selection of IP ranges. You can navigate to the URL which I have given here, davidc.net sites default subnets subnets.html, where you can try by trial and error method. You can give some of the IP addresses, and you can divide the IP addresses as per your convenient. That's what you can choose. If you want, I can show you this thing. This URL. Let me open how to answer this thing. Arrow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you can see by default one IP address came 192.168.0.0, and it is having the main IP address. This is for VPC level, and it is slashed with 16. If I click on update, it will give the number of IP addresses which are available. So for this IP range, we can see 65,534 IP addresses are available. So if I want one subnet, I can directly use this thing. If I want two subnets, I will click here. If I want three subnets, I will click again here. If I want four, I can click here. So that all the four subnets can have equal number of hosts, right? That means IP addresses. And I will take each one of these IP addresses and insert into the subnet section. So don't worry about this thing. I will show you how we can do that. Yeah, we wanted to create a VPC separately apart from the default VPC. Then in the AWS management console, you can go to VPC service, and then you can click on the VPC dashboard, which is showing here like this in the VPC dashboard. If you click on the VPC dashboard, you will select and get an option called Launch VPC Wizard. If you click on the Launch VPC, it will ask you to, it will give you multiple options. If you want VPC with single public subnet or public subnet and private subnet or other options, it will give. You can choose whichever you want and click on the select. And then this is a section where you need to enter the IP addresses. The first block shows the primary CADR block. This belongs to the main VPC IP addresses, and by default it took 10.0.0.0.16. You can take this thing and you can enter in the IP address in the URL which I have shown in the previous slide. By default it took the it divided the subnets in the for two subnets. So by default it took 24, and it has 251 available IP addresses. If you are fine with this thing, you can choose. So there is nothing harm to choose by default came options. And if you click on submit, your VPC will be created automatically with all the options which are required. So apart from the VPC, you can have multiple options. Like once you create the VPC, you can see the number of options which are created. So this is a screenshot which belongs to default VPC, and if you create a new one, it will have increased number of sections. You can see the default VPC is one for me, and subnets I am having three, and route tables I am having one, internet gateway I am having one, egress one internet gateway is 0, DHCP option set is 1, NAT gateway is 0, VPC peering connections is 0, network ACL is 1, security groups are 4. So these are the list you can see once you create a VPC, or by default also you will be able to see. And this is the diagram of AWS default VPC network diagram. Here you can see from the from the outside internet the connection is coming like this, and touching to the VPC, and through the router, the internet is routing through the route tables. From the route tables, it is going to the network ACLs and forwarding to the respective public subnet and private subnet. This is the flow of internet, and from the public subnet and private subnet, the internet will pass on to the respective servers which we have launched. This is the same diagram which I have shown in a different way. Because some people doesn't want to expose their instances, they want more secure network. In such situations, they wanted to create one public subnet which where they will use this idea bastion host. That means an intermediate host to log into their actual servers. So they use as an intermediate server, that is they make it as a public subnet, and they make it as another one as a private subnet. So they will use this public subnet to log into the private subnet and perform their activities. If you see, the internet is flowing from here, connecting to the AWS VPC, and then flowing to this public subnet and navigating to the private subnet, and the connections are returning back to the same flow. This is how the AWS VPC and subnets and public subnet, private subnet, and multiple availability zones, and all these things are maintained and managed. So let me know if you have any questions.